Are you considering leaving the profession? 42% said yes.
You're joking.
The headlines were more shocking than even we'd expected. 44% met the threshold for clinically significant levels of depression. 38% symptoms of anxiety, potentially they're struggling a lot more than everyone else. 78% experiencing symptoms of burnout.
This is the only report of its kind, right?
I believe so.
It's really
Being on the
traumatic.
receiving end of hostility, that's tough. They're going to leave. So we have the little book of HR resilience, something that's accessible, that's easy to use. Your event will be the first place that I'll be able to release the early results of our 2026 survey, embedding robust systems of support. That could change the whole profession.
It will change the game. It's going to be a mega one. Welcome to In The Mixx, People and Talent, the podcast where we dive into stories, challenges and successes shaping the world of HR and talent. Each episode, we sit down with the people behind the company, HR leaders, talent experts and business innovators to uncover what really drives great teams and thriving workplaces. So for anyone listening in, Jo, could you tell us a little bit about you, who you are, your journey so far, and perhaps how you ended up in HR Wellbeing and Burnout?
Sure. So I am Dr Jo Burrell. I'm a clinical psychologist by background. So I spent most of my career working in the NHS as a leader and a clinician in mental health services. Mm-hmm. And around 11 or 12 years ago, I launched a company called Ultimate Resilience, along with my business partner, Felicity Baker, who's also a clinical psychologist. And we launched that business because in the NHS, we were finding that we were seeing lots of people who were experiencing mental health difficulties like depression, trauma, anxiety, whose problems really were, at the source of their problems was in the workplace. And the kind of model of delivery in the NHS is such that you can't go into workplaces and tackle that problem at source. So that was really our aim, you know, when we set up our company, Ultimate Resilience, to try to tackle those problems at source. And so we were delivering training and coaching and so on, you know, services like that to kind of help to, you know, boost well-being, mental health and so on across organisations. And actually, through the first sort of half of our journey, HR professionals were the people who often commissioned our services. So we were meeting lots of HR professionals, we were having lots of conversations with HR professionals. And when the pandemic hit, we started to learn a bit about how much the pandemic and the pressures that came with the pandemic were affecting HR professionals. Right. And one of the things that we noticed was there was a shift in the sort of trends in terms of our services. And that was that HR professionals who hadn't necessarily been utilising our services, they'd been commissioning them, suddenly started to ask for help for themselves. And it just gave us pause. You know, we just thought, why is this happening? What's this about? We'd already been hearing anecdotally about the pressures that they were facing through the pandemic. And we know, my goodness, you know, HR professionals, everything landed on their laps, didn't it, during the pandemic? Yeah. So they were facing, and actually I think they were kind of unsung heroes in many ways, weren't they?
I dread to think what the world was like. Absolutely. You know, and it's not even like you can leave things at the door in that case, because they weren't leaving their four walls, were they?
No, absolutely. So so we started to wonder about the mental well-being of HR professionals, and we wondered, what data is there out there? You know, as academics and researchers ourselves, that's where you start, isn't it? You go, is there data out there already? Is there research out there already that tells us something about the mental well-being of HR professionals? And what did we find? Pretty much nothing.
Really?
And that was really surprising. I guess that just kind of, I suppose that catapulted us onto a journey that we didn't really expect to go on, you know. And so we decided to design a survey ourselves. We said, why don't we we need data, don't we? Because data is really helpful in establishing if there's something really going on. You know, we know anecdotally that people are struggling, but data tells us for sure. So we launched our first survey, and that, like I say, catapulted us along a journey that we really didn't
Did you
expect to go on.
anticipate it exploding
No,
like that?
not at all. I mean, the first time we did our survey, we ran it in late 2023 and launched the report in 2024.
Okay.
And it was when the report came out, really, that we just, it was like, okay, so certainly we were surprised by the data. We expected it to not be good, but it was a lot worse than we expected it to be.
Yeah.
And I think because of that, and because it was speaking to something that people weren't talking openly about very much, I think that's what exploded, really. That's why it exploded, because we were tapping into something that people really identified with, but weren't talking openly about.
And why do you think that was? Why wasn't it spoken about openly?
I think for lots of reasons. See, as a psychologist, I just think this is fascinating, and I think for lots of reasons. I think that HR professionals are the people you turn to for solutions. Okay. And they're also, their remit's changed a lot over, the past few decades, and well-being is in their remit. So you don't expect to go to them thinking that they're going to be struggling. You expect to go to them for solutions. And I think that expectation, and I know that myself as a psychologist, that people look to me expecting that I'm going to have all the answers. Okay. They are surprised if I say, I'm struggling too, So I think there's that. Yeah. But I think one of the differences between me as a psychologist and HR professionals is that I've always had in my career a source of support that acknowledges that my work's going to be tough. So I've always had clinical supervision all the way through my career. And part of that is about saying, you're going to need support because this work has an impact. It's going to have an impact on you emotionally in terms of your well-being. And that type of support has not been around for HR professionals. So that the acknowledgement that comes with a system of support like that hasn't been there. So I think HR professionals feel a sense of stigma and shame about saying that they're struggling.
I thought you might allude to that, actually. And sometimes that air of vulnerability is much more human, isn't it? To know that, the person that I normally lean on does go through the same stuff as me, and that's okay. I imagine the data has really helped not only HR professionals understand, normalize and talk about it and find solutions, but hopefully it's urging leaders to get it and be on board with it as well. And to a degree, I find the smaller businesses where they don't have HR professionals, probably the leaders are in the same boat, where they have no one to simply lean on, and things that could lead to burnout could be quite easily squashed. And we're going to talk about that. So what do you see as potential early signs to know if one is on the kind of footpath to burnout?
So I think a lot of people aren't aware that there's a number of kind of phases that happen that are much more subtle before you hit that burnout point. And I think the problem is that people, perhaps they notice them, perhaps they don't. But if they do notice them, they ignore them.
Yeah.
And it's only when they hit that kind of absolutely falling on my knees stage that they realise they're burnt out.
Yeah.
And if people could recognise those earlier stages, then actually these are opportunities to intervene and to do something. So first stage is striving. And I think actually that's the kind of foundation, that's the ultimate cause, is we're striving slightly beyond our capacity. And it's okay to do that over the short term. If you've got a piece of work that needs, got a tight deadline and you've got a big project on and you need to really give yourself, really
it's not
push yourself.
Sustainable long term, is it?
Exactly. And all the stages that come beyond that are to do with the fact that we're pushing ourselves beyond our capacity. So we start to feel tired.
And it really takes its toll, doesn't it? It grinds you down.
Absolutely. We start to feel tired. We start to get a bit cynical and a bit kind of disconnected.
A bit resentful, maybe.
A bit resentful, absolutely. we start to get anxious because we're not performing at the level that we should be, that we feel we should be. And that's partly because if you push something beyond its capacity, then the functioning starts to reduce, doesn't it? So sometimes even what we could normally do when we weren't under masses of pressure, we can't do anymore.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I think is overlooked is that often people who are experiencing the early stages and later stages of burnout, they're experiencing quite a lot of anxiety because they know they're not performing at their best, and they're worrying about that,
And anxiety is quite often the case of people not being in that present moment, isn't it? It's always worrying about what has previously happened or what's going to happen in the future. Am I going to hit target? Am I performing, 10 out of 10? And it's never being in that moment. And that's one thing I've massively learned is you're worrying about the past or the future, aren't you?
Yes.
But a lot of it's to do with bandwidth, from what I'm hearing from you, is like pushing yourself to the degree where you physically have no bandwidth left.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that push usually comes both internally and externally. It comes from your wider organisation and the pressures that they're putting on you, but it can also come from the pressures that you put on yourself. Perfectionism, overworking, striving to achieve something that you perceive needs to be achieved, that promotion, that, better salary, whatever it is. So, I think it's often a mixture of those two factors.
It's a two-way street, isn't it? I think if you are someone that naturally shines and that you do an amazing job and you're putting this pressure on yourself to always better and to always go above and beyond, sometimes that becomes the norm to the leader, and they think, okay, they're fine. They're quiet over there. They're doing a great job, and they don't think that there's anything else going on underlying behind that.
Yes. And actually, I think it's, it's the people who are conscientious, who are most conscientious, who want to do the best job, who want to do right by people, who are the most vulnerable to burnout, because they will go the extra mile.
Yeah. So tell us a little more about the report, because I am really intrigued. So your first one was 23.
Yep.
And you are very close to launching the 2026 report, the window of opportunity for people to be involved. Yes. So what sort of data did the last report bring to light, and what story did that tell about HR professionals and how they're feeling out there?
So, as you say, we've conducted a second report now. So in 2025, we ran a survey throughout the whole of February, and our 2026 survey will be open throughout most of February too this year. So we had 1,421 respondents, which was a significant jump from the previous survey that we did. So we had a really good, sample size. And I think, statistically that's important.
And that's across the UK, is it?
Yeah. I mean, we actually don't know where the respondents came from, because we didn't ask about their geographical location. But I suspect that the large majority were based in the UK. We probably had some people from abroad. I think this year we'll get more from abroad, from across the globe.
Well, especially with your audience growing and growing. You just hit 17,000 followers on LinkedIn. You're doing something right, aren't you?
Yes, and actually we've been running some free webinars at the back end of last year, and in terms of attendees, we've had people from right across the globe attending. So that tells us that our reach is, a
colleague
growing.
Of mine actually jumped on one of your webinars, so I know how valuable people find them, and it's that kind of those extra touches that really make the difference, isn't it? And you speak from the heart as well. I've seen the content you put out there. It's certainly drawn in a huge attraction, hasn't it? And when I look at the people that are liking and engaging, quite often we've had few mutual colleagues, acquaintances and friends, haven't we? And I think you've done really well to build the community that you're building. You're not finished yet, are you?
No, not by any stretch.
So we've got this window open for anyone that would like to be a part of it for the month of February.
Yeah.
So what we will do is we'll post a snippet of this and we'll put a link in so that any HR professionals out there listening to this can be a part of the survey, and then we'll be a part of obviously the report that comes out. So what sorts of things from the previous one have you noticed that you can share with people listening in?
So we used a number of statistically valid measures, clinical measures of things like depression, anxiety, burnout, well-being, and so on. So the headlines were more shocking than we'd expected, having spoken to HR professionals and heard about their experiences. So 44% of our respondents met the threshold for clinically significant levels of depression. So almost half of our respondents are experiencing, symptoms of depression that are really quite concerning.
That's horrifying.
And if you look at rates of depression, clinically significant depression across the general population, and you compare that figure, it's about 3.5 times higher than we would expect to see in the general population.
Good. So that was a shock to you?
Absolutely, it was a shock. And in terms of anxiety, we had 38% reaching the threshold for clinically significant symptoms of anxiety, which is 1.5 times higher than the general population. So we've got a professional group who are experiencing levels of mental health distress that's probably a lot higher than the other people in their organisation. And if you think, there's an irony there, isn't there? Because HR professionals have well-being in their remit.
Yeah.
They're the ones we're going to give us solutions to well-being problems within the organisation, and potentially they're struggling a lot more than everyone else. In terms of burnout, 63% were in the category for very likely suffering from burnout, and a further 15% were deemed to be at risk of burnout. So we've got there, 78% of our respondents experiencing, again, concerning symptoms of burnout. And in terms of well-being, 67% were in the range for low levels of well-being. So again, concerning in relation to their well-being. We also asked, are you considering leaving the profession? And 42% said yes.
I saw this on your LinkedIn post fairly recently, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah. So obviously we don't know why they're thinking about leaving the profession, but I guess we can make an educated, guess, given our data, that the pressures that people are experiencing, the levels of stress and struggle that they're experiencing is a contributing factor to that.
Am I right in thinking this is HR professionals across the board? So you would have people directors, you would also have HR advisors, you could have a coordinator in there, HRBP. It's really open to anyone in the HR profession.
Absolutely, right across the board. And we didn't ask people what their job titles were.
Yeah.
We asked them if their work was substantively within the realm of HR.
Yeah.
So these are just people whose substantive work is HR related.
Okay.
And we don't know what level they're at. So it's right across, we suspect it's right across the board. Yeah.
42% are considering leaving their profession.
Yes, absolutely. And we also asked about sources of stress.
Okay.
So we asked people, what are your sort of 3 biggest sources of stress? So we had a range of about 15 possible answers, and people could tick which ones they thought were the main sources of stress. So we had things in there like a lack of training, attrition rates, those sorts of things. And the top 50% of people who responded said that workload was the main source of stress. Unsurprising, probably. Certainly we know, if we look at data right across organisations, regardless of what job you do, workload comes out high as a source of stress. 41% said poor management.
Okay, so very high.
And I'm just checking my notes, 29%, I've got my glasses on, so said lack of support. So those were the 3 main things that came out of the tick box part of that question.
Workload, leadership, lack of support.
Yes. We don't know with leadership whether that's referring to your immediate leadership within your team.
Yeah.
So people might be talking about their HR leaders,
Mm-hmm.
or they might be talking about senior leadership within the organisation. I suspect it's a bit of both.
And will the questions be exactly the same this year as they were last year, or will you refine any of them?
Pretty much they'll be the same questions. Yeah, we've made a few tweaks, but not very many.
And is there a particular reason why you're not asking what level they are in HR, or what they mean, define what you mean by leader? Is that because you don't want anyone to feel like they're going to be called out potentially, or it's just a little bit too much sensitive information that they're divulging?
Well, one of the things that you have to be very aware of when you're designing a survey is how long it's going to take people to complete.
There is that, isn't there?
And there's research out there that says if it takes people longer than 10 minutes to complete, you're going to lose a load of people.
Yeah.
So we were very aware of wanting to kind of hone it down on the questions that we felt were most important, and keeping it as lean as possible.
But
so
still getting substantial amount of information
Exactly.
to tell a story with.
And I guess one of the things that put us off dividing people into sort of categories in terms of their jobs is that HR's got a lot of titles. And so it's quite difficult, actually, if we wanted to divide people, it's quite difficult to put them into those.
And then some people don't fit into certain titles either. Depending on their organisation, they might have created their own internal titles that slightly differ from the norm. So,
and actually, HR manager means one thing in one organisation, and it involves one set of duties, and in another organisation it means something completely different. So I think we just thought, you know what? And also there's something about how much information we go into amass and then put out into the world. Because again, you put out a report into the world, and people are only going to read the highlights. And so if you're trying to slice it down, of course that's fascinating and interesting, but there's only so much slicing you can do before you lose people, because you're giving them too much information. So I think it's the kind of overall highlights, what's gone right across the profession, that actually is most important to us in terms of getting the message out there. And we don't want to dilute the message too much, because actually, regardless of what your role is, if half of your profession are thinking about leaving, almost half of your profession are thinking about leaving, and almost half of your profession are suffering from symptoms of depression that mean they meet that clinical threshold, then that's a concern.
Big concern.
It's a big concern.
So what are you hoping off the back of the report? Is it more to raise awareness? Is it I imagine that's probably the number one key focus. Is there anything else that you're hoping to achieve from this? And what, last year you said 1,000 and something. So what are you hopeful for numbers to increase this year?
Absolutely. I mean, we got close to 1,500 respondents in 2025. 3,000 would be amazing. So to double that would be absolutely amazing.
Big dreams. But I feel like you're up for it.
We're gunning for it,
You're going to get there.
And I think, the first thing is absolutely raising awareness. I think that, it's really powerful. And, we've had responses from people. I've spoken to so many HR professionals, in my DMs, on email, online. There's just something incredibly powerful about the impact of this data. And it's really knocked me over, And one of the things that I've seen is that it's helped people to feel less alone. And I think that's been really, really important. It seems like a small thing.
This is the only report of its kind, right?
I believe so, that focuses specifically on mental wellbeing in HR. Yeah.
Do you know what pains me as well? Being obviously in the recruitment industry, I hear a lot of people, onlookers, the role of HR is diminishing with AI. It's less and less needed. And I'm thinking, wow, when you look at this data, we'll see how the world of work survives without HR professionals in situ and all the firefighting that goes on and mediation and, everything that falls within that remit. But because it's not talked about, they're probably not saying anything that they don't really believe. They don't know all of this, and this goes on behind the scenes. So I think that in its own merit alone is going to be worth its weight in gold.
Well, you know what? I realised that one of the things that AI is doing in HR is it is potentially taking away the easier bits of people's jobs, the admin bits, the procedural bits. And what it's leaving is the more complex people work.
Human stuff.
The human stuff, exactly. And so we need to be acknowledging and recognising the impact of that work even more, because it's going to be having an even greater effect.
Yeah.
And actually, you know, in some ways it's no bad thing that we get rid of, you know, HR professionals get to get rid of some of that boring stuff.
The transactional, you know, not many people want to do that low level admin stuff.
But actually it gives you a bit of relief. You know, if you spend a little bit of time filling in a spreadsheet or whatever it is, you know, doing a bit of admin, firing off some emails, it gives you a bit of respite from that complex human work that you're doing, you know?
Yeah.
So in some ways it's a bit of a concern. It's a good thing, but it's also a bit of a concern if we're going to be putting people in positions where they're dealing with all that really complex human stuff, the delivering of the bad news, the getting in there and having to deal with complex dynamics, the listening to people talk about traumatic things.
It's really traumatic.
Being on the receiving end of people's, you know, hostility. That's tough. That's really tough work. And so both, you know, raising awareness, I think, is hugely important. But on the back of raising awareness, if we can all recognise and acknowledge this is the impact of the work that people are doing, then we have to put measures in place to protect people. So for me, you know, there's a mission about really recognising that robust systems of support need to be put in place to protect HR professionals, because, you know, we've got this data already. They're leaving in droves, you know. They're going to leave, and we're not going to have the people who actually are really experienced dealing with all that complex stuff that no one else wants to deal with.
That's right. It's going to be an industry that gradually falls flat, because people are probably not going to get into it at the lower level. The top of the funnel are going to start to fall out with the burnout, and eventually we're potentially going to be in a very dire situation. I think the word that was coming to me when you were talking then was there's a lot of trauma that
absolutely.
HR professionals deal with, and therefore it becomes trauma to them because they have families to go home to. And actually, naturally, what do humans do? Talk about their day. You meet someone in the pub, what do you do for work? And they're holding on to this. It's like a weight on their shoulders 24/7. A client of mine that we actually had on the pod a couple of months ago, she said, you know what, it's my daughter. When I walked away from my job, my daughter said, she was only 12, Mummy, I'm so happy. She walked away without a job to go to because there was that much pressure on her. And the little girl had noticed how much her mum had changed. She said, Mummy, I'm so happy that you've left. And she said that right there was all I needed to know. And she made the decision and she moved on.
Yes.
But what you're talking about is to put measures and solutions in place. We don't get to that point.
Yes.
So we're not losing truly amazing professionals in the industry.
Yes, absolutely. And I guess that exactly is why I feel so passionately, and where I connect with HR professionals, because I've been doing a job all my career that has that impact, you know, where I'm exposed to traumatic material, I'm taking it home with me, I'm carrying it around with me, I'm facing ethical questions and dilemmas around some of that stuff, that people work that I'm doing. I know what it's like, you know, but I've had a system of support in place for me. So it's helped me to process that stuff, to process the impact of it, and also to have a space to think through about how do I deal with it, what are the solutions, how do I address some of these really tricky ethical dilemmas that I'm facing or questions that I'm facing. I've had a system of support in place. So I guess I've come to that other mission, which is, like I said, encouraging the profession as a whole and organisations to be thinking about putting systems of support in place.
So that leads us on really nicely. What advice would you give to individuals? So this is HR professionals of any stage or walk of life. How can they ensure that they don't go down this route of burnout? How can they check in and look after their well-being?
Well, I think ultimately it's a joint project. I don't want to put all the responsibility onto individuals. I see a lot when I see stuff that's about HR and their well-being, there's a lot of focus, I think too much focus on self-care. So this is things that you need to do to look after yourself. You know, I went to the Festival of Work conference, CIPD conference in last year. There was a session on wellbeing in HR, and it was all about self-care. And I was kind of disappointed, you know,
That it
because
wasn't a joint ownership.
Absolutely.
No.
I think we need to be acknowledging and recognizing this is not the task of HR professionals. Yes, there are things that you can do as an individual. Yes, we have a responsibility to look after ourselves and our well-being, but our organisations and our profession have to be doing something too. So I'm caveating before I start.
That was my next question, by the way. What can the leaders do?
Absolutely. But I think that, you know, there are small things that we can all be doing. And I think that particularly in HR, one of the things that is important is to be connecting with other people and talking to them about the impact of the work. You know, I've already talked about how acknowledgement is really important, and how when you realise that someone else is struggling in the same way that you're struggling, the blame shifts. We stop blaming ourselves and telling ourselves it's our fault and something to do with us. The impact is normalised, and we start to see that actually other people are experiencing similar things to us, and we start to realise that actually this is a systemic problem. It's not our fault. We don't blame ourselves in the same way. And that blame, you know, it comes out of stigma. It leads us down a path that is really not healthy for us. It leads us down that burnout path. We strive more. We do all that other stuff. So just talking to someone else, just connecting with someone else around the impact of the work, I think is really important. And I know there are lots of lone HR professionals out there. So it's not always easy to have a conversation with another HR professional about what it's like to do this job, you know.
I bet you if that was one of your questions in the survey, it would probably score really highly in terms of like the loneliness of a HR professional, because it's a super lonely job, isn't it? Not many organisations are lucky enough to have, you know, a substantial team within the people remit.
Absolutely. So I think that for those people, they have to make extra effort. But I mean, you know, thankfully with the internet, you know, one of the good things about the internet is communities appear, don't they? So there are lots of communities out there now, aren't there?
There are.
Free, you know, Facebook groups and, you know, membership groups that, you know, you could pay for, but, you know, small amount. So there are lots of places where you can connect with other people. And of course, if you work in HR, even if you're a lone HR professional, you probably know other HR professionals working elsewhere. So there's something about that informal, you know, contact that you have with other people where you can have conversations. I think that's the first step, you know, just doing that makes a difference because it normalises.
And then for a leader, what can they be doing?
A leader in HR, do you mean? Or organisation?
Leader of a business, MD, CEO, whoever that HR person then reports into.
So I think they need to be acknowledging and recognising too, because if your organisation is saying, we understand the impact of the work, that makes a huge difference. But automatically, they're also acknowledging that they have a responsibility to do something about it. So I think that organisations really need to be thinking about what systems do we put in place that support our HR professionals. And, you know, I've not talked about another bit of data that we have from our survey last year, which is that we found only 13% of our respondents felt supported by their organisations in relation to their mental well-being. But of those people who felt well supported, what we found was their mental health was better. They were much less likely to be suffering from burnout. They were much less likely to be thinking about leaving the profession. And they were much less likely to have taken time off work in the previous year as a result of stress or other mental health related issues. So that finding, and I think it was probably our most important finding, tells us that if you're supporting your HR professionals, that's good for them, it's good for their families, it's good for their teams, but it's good for your bottom line too.
Productivity, performance, bottom line.
you know? So it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
So then the question becomes, well, what systems of support do we need to be putting in place? You know, that's the next question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that we really need to be moving away from these kind of tokenistic, you know, we'll put on a workshop and then we've done it. We've done stress.
Tick box exercise.
Yeah, exactly. We absolutely, and we need to be moving away from that more broadly in terms of mental, you know, in terms of well-being within organisations, regardless of what job you do. You know, we need to be thinking about, particularly for HR, because they're facing these unique pressures, you know, regular, robust, evidence-based sources of support that people can access. And I don't know if you know this, but we are now delivering supervision to HR professionals. So the model of supervision that I've received all the way through my career, we're now applying that across HR. And it, you know, I think that model of personal professional development, a system of support that's about that. It's about helping you develop in your career, your skills, your abilities, you know, those sorts of things. But also the personal bit, it's about supporting you as an individual, a place where you can go and say, I've just had a conversation with a staff member who's got terminal cancer. You know, it's affected me like this.
Yeah.
A place where you could talk about that, you can process it, you can think about it, is so important. Because if you can do that, you can leave it at work and you go away and you can get the most out of your leisure time.
I think the personal conversations probably hit harder than the performance related stuff, because firstly, hearing from a staff member or an employee that they're going through a marriage breakup, or that they can't afford to pay their electricity bills, or that somebody in their family's got terminal illness, or that they're bereaving. So, you know, that's hard enough anyway to navigate. Through all the empathy in the world and compassion, that's hard enough to navigate, let alone if you have been through or are going through something similar.
Yes.
That's where it becomes really tricky.
Yes. And that's exactly one of the reasons that we have in my profession, supervision is embedded across the profession, because it acknowledges exactly that. You know, you're going to be working with people who are experiencing traumatic experiences that you've had too, or that family members have had. And you're going to have to tread really carefully to be able to support them in a sensitive way, but also be kind of impartial and, you know, disconnected, if you like.
It's a real fine balance, isn't it?
It's really fine balance. And supervision helped me to do that. You know, I had lots of situations where I was working with people doing therapy and so on, who'd experienced things that I'd experienced, you know. But supervision helped me to manage that in a way that meant that I could deliver the best service possible to that person.
Yeah. I love what you said as well a moment ago. You made a really good point around the community piece, because I feel like certainly moving out of the pandemic, it was a tough time for everyone, but most importantly, as we've already established, HR professionals, hugely tough time for them. There's been more online connectivity and more online engagement and community building and soundboarding, but there's not been as much face-to-face, which is one of the very many reasons that you and I have become connected. MIXXOS have been growing a community in the Mixx for the past 4 years, but not really intending to, not really knowing that that's where it was leading. We just bring our entire client base is HR professionals, with a few business leaders thrown in there for smaller organizations, but by and large it is your HR professionals. And we've been bringing them in a room together for 4 years now, 3-4 times a year, putting on a complimentary event, be it well-being, be it employee value proposition, AI, International Women's Day, you name it, we've pretty much hosted it. And what I loved about you, and I stumbled across you on LinkedIn, is everything you stood for around the wellbeing and burnout, because I've not heard anyone else talk about it before, but I know it's happening right in front of my very eyes with our clients, and they don't talk about it. And, you know, you might have the odd snippet, probably more because of my level. They wouldn't necessarily talk to my team about it, but, you know, occasionally I've made friends through the industry and we'll go for a glass of wine, and you really do hear what goes on behind the scenes and just how much they are struggling. So I love that we've joined forces, and that you, Jo, will be headlining our event on 18th of March. which is all around HR wellbeing and burnout. And you're going to be sharing some really great and powerful insights, aren't you? And also people can get involved in the survey in the month of February, which is also a value add. Something you haven't mentioned to us. You're also an author of a book, right?
Yes. Well, we actually have a book in the pipeline too.
Ooh.
But so we have the little book of HR resilience. So it actually came about, we didn't really plan on publishing a book, but we created this little booklet as a freebie for a conference that we were involved in. You know, the conference organisers said, if you've got a thing that you'd like to share as part of the kind of goodie bag, you know. And so we were like, oh, we'll make this little booklet that's called The Little Book of HR Resilience. And then I did a post about it on LinkedIn. Of course, what happened? We had loads of people going, where can I buy this? You know? And so we said, oh, well, we might as well create it. And so you can get it on Amazon. And it's really, I mean, it is a little book. You know, it's meant to be a small thing, a small guide with some really simple tips in that you can carry around. You can put it in your handbag. It's got a few exercises in it. It's meant to be something that's accessible, that's easy to use.
Sometimes less is more. Like you said earlier, 10-minute attention span and people are checking out. So something that they can just, you know, even if it was a page a day, isn't it? Or a quick reference to if they're having a tough time.
Absolutely. So that's what it's meant to be. And actually, you know, through all our work, the work that we've been doing around, you know, well-being more broadly, we've been all about that, really, about making sure we're providing tips that we know work, that are evidence-based, you know, absolutely about being evidence-based, but that are quick and easy to use, because people's lives are incredibly busy, aren't they? So you need things that you can do kind of almost on the move, you know, rather than spending, you know, half an hour or an hour doing a mindfulness exercise. You need something that's really quick and accessible.
And current as well. I mean, I've been watching you from afar for a while. That sounds so weird, doesn't it? But admiring your work from afar. And I can't wait to see you in action on the 18th of March. I'm really looking forward to it. And we're also partnering with an organisation called ACO, who's one of our clients. They've been to our events time after time after time. So the three-way collaboration is going to be amazing. On the day as well, we'll have a live panel hosted as well, which I think they are also amazing, because that's when people really feel like, you know, Chat and House rules, we are in this space. I'm going to put my hand up and ask the question. It's real, it's live, that's where we really get a lot of great value as well. So we'll absolutely have you doing what you do best and sharing your magic with everyone. And then we'll have the kind of more conversational piece after that as well.
And I should say that your event will be the first place that I'll be able to release the early results of our 2026 survey.
You're joking. I didn't think they would be ready till summertime.
So we won't be releasing our report until after that.
Okay.
But we will have the headline data.
So we've got some
results.
Inside information.
So it will be the first forum in which I'll be able to talk about the main findings of the survey.
And now I'm excited. I wasn't expecting that, so that's a nice treat, definitely.
Yeah.
So let's move on to you. A couple of personal questions. Who's been the biggest inspiration, Jo, in your career to date?
Oh gosh. I think the person that comes to mind for me when you ask that question is actually a supervisor that I had when I was in my sort of early career. In fact, she was my supervisor whilst I was training to become a clinical psychologist, and actually quite soon afterwards as well, because I went to work in the service that she was working in. Unsurprisingly, given that I'd already made a connection with her and I liked her. But I suppose she was inspiring to me because she was incredibly good at what she did, you know, incredibly knowledgeable and, you know, well-versed and astute. But she was also able to support me in a way that made a huge difference, you know, that really helped me with my kind of imposter syndrome and all of those things that you get when you're particularly early in your career. She was able to reframe, I think, because I was, you know, I went into clinical psychology a bit later than some people. Everything I did in my life on my path was a bit later than everyone else, because I left school without any qualifications at 16. So I kind of went a bit wayward for a while. And so while I was training, I felt a little bit like, I don't know, I wasn't like everyone else. I felt like a bit of an outlier. And I felt like that made me perhaps not as good as everyone else.
Yeah.
You know, like you do. It's that imposter
Story you
thing.
tell yourself, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
She was able to put a different
She
spin on
believed
that.
in you when perhaps you
Yeah.
didn't believe in yourself, or you didn't quite see.
Exactly. She was able to actually say, you know what, your life experience is really valuable here. Like, I was already a mum, you know, at the stage that I was doing my training. And so I knew absolutely what it was like to have a young child. I knew what it was like, you know, the anxieties that you have when you've got a small baby.
Yeah.
You know, I knew what it was like to have, you know, relationships that didn't work, you know, and that kind of thing. I knew what it was like to work for a difficult boss.
Yeah, your life
So,
experience.
Actually, I realised, she made me realise how valuable that experience was. And because it meant I could be empathic with the people that I was working with.
Love that. And what's the best piece of career advice anyone's ever given you?
Well, you know, it's connected with that in a way. You know, I think that we have, particularly now with social media, I think we're presented with a kind of idea about the way that life should be, you know, that it...
Don't get me started. This could be a whole another podcast, couldn't it?
and I think, you know, actually, what's given my life richness, you know, and I'm like, you know, I'm in my late 50s now. I'm not embarrassed to say. And so, you know, I've had a bit of life now. What's given my life richness has not been the straightforward bits. It's been the bumps in the road, you know. And so I think actually that same supervisor, you know, was a person who opened my eyes up to that, who made me realise that you learn from those experiences massively. You learn not just about life itself and about other people, but you learn about yourself. You learn about your inner strengths. And actually, when I look back at those really difficult times, you know, being a single mum and, you know, losing my son's dad, you know, and those sorts of things, those things were I don't want to say character building, but those things made me recognize what I had inside myself.
It gives you that bounce back ability you never thought you'd have. It's not until you put in that position that you really embrace it, is it? And you know what? I don't think anyone's ever said that in all of the episodes that I've filmed so far. No one's ever said the negative that's turned into a positive, that all of the bumps in the road will lead you to exactly where you're meant to be. I'm a firm believer in that.
Yes, I feel that too, very much, very much. And those things have really informed who I am now, you know. And so I guess, you know, it's about that kind of squiggly life path, isn't it? And, you know, there are books out now and podcasts about squiggly careers, aren't there? Yeah. But, I'm a firm believer in the squiggly career, because that's what I've had. And it's not a single piece of advice, but I think it's an important one because, like I said, it's the squiggles that give you that meaning. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. No, I love that. So if you could change one thing and one thing only about the HR profession, what would that be?
Well, I'm going to go back to what I've been talking about, really. It is... you know, embedding robust systems of support. That to me, that could change the whole profession.
It will change the game entirely.
I think that's my mission. And I mean, it might sound a bit crazy given that I've just revealed I'm in my late 50s. It's like,
it's never too late.
How much time have I got? But that's my mission, really, is to you know, convince the profession as a whole that is what's needed in order to bolster the whole of the profession and to really, you know, I went to a book launch last week of a book that's, you know, all about the future of the profession of HR. And I just think if you have that foundation that holds people and contains people, then like the world is your oyster, you know?
I think those that like onlookers and leaders of businesses or uplines that want a quick fix and for it to happen tomorrow, they might seem willing, that they're on board, but it's not going to be that quick and easy. I think it's a process, isn't it? It's a belief. You have to want to embed it as you would a sales strategy, or
Yes.
you know, something where you can see the ROI in the business. You have to be fully embracing of it.
Yes. And, you know, we've already touched on AI. That's going to have a massive impact on the profession as a whole. But, you know, we're living in a really complex world now, aren't we? The pace of change is massively quick, isn't it? It's like change after change after change after change. Workplaces are complex places to be. And therefore, there's increasing need for this type of support to be in place, because the job's not going to get any easier. It's going to get more complex, and we're having to create more complex solutions to problems. We're having to think in a much more, you know, kind of multi-layered way, aren't we, about the challenges that we're facing within workplaces.
Yeah. I think not only are we thinking in multi-layered ways, but we're hit with or multi-layered problems and issues, and we've got multi-layered distractions when you look at the different pieces of technology that perhaps our children have now been exposed to. When you think about our parents and how simplistic, I'm not saying life was easy for them, by no means, by no stretch. They had their own challenges, but our brains are not really built to deal with that amount of technology. And this is how I do see the instant gratification piece with the younger generation, because that is what the world is like out there. So it's a false illusion.
Yes.
When it comes to the workplace.
Yes. And I think that we're not really built for that pace of change either, are we? No. Like, we're used to things grinding along, you know. It's like, I remember the time when you know, if you wanted to communicate with them, you sent them a letter. With people, you sent them a letter, you know. And it's like, it was a few days before they got it, and then they sent a letter back, and that was
my son is 10. He's just been opened up to the world of technology. He's got a phone. Him, not just him, they're all culprits. Him and his friends, they will send a message, and if someone doesn't immediately answer, they spam. Like, what are you doing? But he's only copying what the others do. Or they'll call. If someone doesn't answer, they'll call and call and call. I said, like, there's a word for that in my world. And my son was like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, that's like, what they call
harassment.
Yeah, well, harassment, a bunny boiler. Like, you can't do that. Well, he's not answering. Okay, did you ever think that he's having dinner, or he's out, or he's busy? You know, all of these things. But that is that instant messaging, you know, and there's this pressure of society that if someone does send you a message or an email and you don't get back to it, that you're a really bad person. But sometimes our brains just need a reset, and like, I know that message is there, but I need to deal with it when my brain is in the right space.
Yes. And those spaces are few and far between now, aren't they? That's a real challenge, I think, for us in organisations generally, to create spaces where we can have a breather and step back and reflect, you know, because actually there's a huge amount of value in having a space to be able to reflect on things. But the opportunities to be able to do that are increasingly limited. Again, brings me back to something like supervision is a place where you can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jo, for anyone listening, where can they find you?
So as you've said, I'm on LinkedIn, so Dr Jo Burrell. Please do connect with me and follow and interact with my posts. I'm talking a lot about HR Wellbeing on LinkedIn, and you can also go to our website, which is ultimateresilience.co.uk, and depending on when you land on our website, you can certainly access our current report, our 2025 HR Mental Wellbeing report on our homepage. There's a button there that you can access and download the report if you want to look in a bit more detail at our survey results.
Amazing. And for those listening that want to meet you in person and see you do your thing and bring it to life, 18th of March, details to be revealed, but it's going to be a mega one. I can't wait to share you with so many amazing people in my network in the HR profession.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jo.